He sawed her arms off, dumped her in a 30-foot ravine, and she still survived so that she could tell the police who he was. Today I want to tell you guys about the story of Mary Vincent, one of the most incredible, courageous women that have probably ever existed. So a little backstory, Mary grew up in a big family. She was one of 7 children. She lived with her parents in Las Vegas, but they ended up having a really messy divorce, and it was really hard on her. She took it very hard, and at one point she decided that she wanted to go live with her grandfather in California. So she was about 14 at the time. She decided to hitchhike from Vegas to California to be with her grandfather. And it takes a while, but she does successfully hitchhike there. She spends a lot of time with him, but eventually she does get homesick, and she tells her grandpa she wants to go back to her family in Vegas. So at age 15, which by the way, she's braver than I could be. At age 15, I could barely go to like the store by myself. She decides to hitchhike from where her grandpa is in California back to Vegas. On her way back, a man by the name of Lawrence Singleton picks her up. And at first he seems harmless. He just seems like any other person who would have helped her out and given her a ride. But she starts to get a little bit nervous and suspicious when she notices that the direction she asked him to be going in is no longer where he's going, and he's actually going the opposite direction now. So she's like, crap, I don't think he's safe. I need to get out of here. So she tries to escape, and he actually hits her with a sledgehammer and knocks her unconscious. When she woke up, she realized that she was tied up and that he had essayed and raped her. There's an interview that you can watch of her telling the story, and it is really, really moving and hard to see her recount what happened. She's, like I said, she is so incredibly strong. Definitely go watch the interview that she does. But she talks about how at one point she talks about freedom, and he says, well, I'll set you free. And then he chops off her arm, basically at the elbow, and then he does it to her other arm as well. So he has now chopped off both her arms. She's in an immense amount of pain, and she passes out. And he thinks that she is dead, so he puts her in the car and drives her to a 30-foot ravine and throws her off of it. And somehow, her just being the baddie that she is, she survives that. And she is in at the most incredible amount of pain. And in her interview, she says that she remembers thinking that she asked God, like, can I just sleep and then I can deal with this tomorrow? And she said that something in her, or that God was talking to her and being like, you need to go now, you have to survive. So she's half Filipino, and she remembers in one of her trips to the Philippines that they said that if you ever get a wound and you can't cauterize it, that you can put mud on a wound to help stop the bleeding. So that's what she does. She puts a bunch of mud on her arms to stop the bleeding, and she attempts to climb up a 30-foot ravine. She is naked, cold, beaten, bleeding profusely. I don't know how she did this, but she climbs up this ravine and eventually gets to the road. At the road, it is not super crowded. There's not a lot of people, and she's having trouble flagging someone down. She ends up having to walk 3 miles before she finds someone who will help her. And if you needed another reason to know that she's just strong and smart and resilient, the whole time she was walking the 3 miles, she had her hands above her head to help stop the bleeding. I don't know how she thought of that in that moment, but she clearly was in it to survive, and she did that, and it's incredible. So a young couple brings her to the hospital, and Mary is getting treatment, and instead of like resting or getting a bunch of treatment, she's like, no, I need to find this guy. She's committed. She's like, I want this guy found. She's giving off all the information she can, and she's even like skipping sleeping to make sure that their composite sketch of him is correct. She wanted them to know undeniably who it was. The police published the composite sketch. They put it out to the news and the public, and about a week after they shared it to the public, a neighbor of Lawrence's comes forward and reports him and says, I'm pretty sure this is my neighbor. He is arrested and convicted of kidnapping and attempted murder. Mary also testifies at his trial, which is a huge part of why he's put away. He is sentenced to 14 years at the maximum. This is the maximum amount of time that someone could be convicted in California at the time. But he literally chopped her arms off, essayed her, and threw her off a ravine, and he's only getting punished for 14 years. Obviously, the public and everyone who knows about this case is pissed at this point. To make it even worse, after 8 years due to good behavior, he gets released. So he gets released 4 years early. And in the trial, he had threatened Mary by saying that he was going to, and I quote, finish the job if it takes me the rest of my life. So I don't know why in the world they let this man out. He's clearly, this is not the first time he's been violent. I don't get why they let him out for good behavior. That's stupid. But while he was in prison, Mary was awarded $2.56 million in a civil judgment suit against him. But because he didn't have money, she never saw a single payment. Despite her trauma, she showed such resilience and strength. She got used to prosthetic arms. She even modified them herself with like tools at home and stuff because like she wanted them to do certain things. She attended the University of Nevada and became an artist. She does a lot of chalk pastel portraits of women. She does like heroic women and like beautiful pieces. I don't know if she still does it, but at one point she was doing commission pieces. She meets her husband, she becomes a mother, and she now has 2 sons as well. Meanwhile, Lawrence gets out of prison. Again, don't know how that happened, but he moves to Florida, and on February 19th of 1997 in Tampa, he strikes again. Again, not shocking because someone who can do this horrific thing, that's not going to be his first or last time being violent. So a painter is coming up to a house to do like routine touch-ups on this house, and as he's walking up, he sees like a horrific thing. There is a man standing in the window. He is drenched in blood, naked, and he is standing over a motionless woman on a sofa, and he is repeatedly stabbing her. And the painter is standing there in shock of like what he's seeing. He's like, oh my god, is this real? And eventually it clicks, like, I need to call the police. And he runs, calls the police, and luckily they get there in time that he can't escape. Unfortunately, she did not make it. She had been dead for quite some time, but they are able to arrest him, and they realize that it is Lawrence again. The woman's name was Roxanne Hayes. She was 31 years old, and she was a mother of 3, and we discovered that he had offered to pay her $20 for she had just recently become to provide for a family. In the trial, Mary comes and testifies against him. Again, she is an incredible person, and the strength that must have taken years later is amazing. After this happened, singleton law was created, which means that kidnapping with intent for a crime is punishable by life in prison. Hopefully this will never happen again. Mary continues to be an artist and a huge advocate for women and victims, and she is just the most incredible person.